Okay, so I know that it is bad practice to start a YouTube channel, make like 2 videos, and then fucking vanish for several months. I'm very sorry that I have done this. I don't know who I'm apologizing to. A lot of life happened, and then university happened, and like I don't even read what I'm supposed to read for university when I'm in university. But the couple of months that I was able to read, I started and got pretty far way through Song of the Sandman. This is a sequel to the first book that I reviewed, God in the Shed. And I finished school yesterday and I made myself, my cat's going fucking crazy. Can you calm down? Thank you. I finished school yesterday, so I drew myself a nice little bath today. That's why my hair is wet, and I sat in and I went, Kennedy, you are not allowed to get out of this tub until you finish this book. I had 60 pages left and I just couldn't do it. I don't know if I want to do a spoiler-filled review for this book. It is not because I do not remember what happened, but it's less on my mind at the moment. I kind of just want to get this over with, which was why I sat myself down and was like, you need to finish this fucking book. I think the best way to compare these is I'm going to, oh my god, no free feed pics, sorry. I'm going to grab the God in the Shed and we're gonna look at the difference between the tabs. Okay, so this is my copy of A God in the Shed, and these are all of the annotation tabs I made for it. There is a shit ton. This was every time something got me excited. Some of them are gore scenes. There's a lot of good characterization notes in here. There's just most of these are me going and getting excited about shit, okay? Every time I got excited about something, I put a little tab in there. There's nothing in this. They're mostly good characterization tabs. I don't think I've ever read a book sequel that feels so different from the first book. So J.F. Dubeau in the first book, okay, so there are a lot of choices that he made that were interesting. He trimmed a lot of fat. There were scenes that were cut that were weird choices, like Venus telling her friends about the god. We don't see that. We just see them being shown the god. The sequel made me realize that the first book has no descriptions of what anyone looks like in it. And that is so very interesting. The chapters were short and punchy, and they really got to the point, but they made you want to keep reading because they were so exciting. And there was all these twists at the end and insane, so exciting. There's this looming threat of the god being trapped, and the chapters in this book are I don't want to say they're so long, because they're not so long. I'm not sitting here going oh, when's this fucking chapter going to end? But it loses that punch that the first one got because of that. So we have prologue short, first chapter. Let's see how long the first chapter is in this. 16 pages long. That is double the page count of the longest chapter in this book. I think the longest one in here is 8 to 10 pages long. They're short and they're punchy. And you'd think that with how much information we got in such little amount of pages for every chapter in this book, that, oh, with longer chapters, we'll just get more information with each chapter. No, that's not what happens. I didn't think I was gonna need the whiteboard, and I don't think I do, but I kind of want to have it as a checklist of chapters that we're gonna go through. So give me 2 seconds. Okay, start. We're gonna go right in with the rating. 1.5 out of 5. I was so fucking bored reading this book. It took forever, and not just because life happened and school happened, but because it just felt like it took forever because I didn't want to read it. We meaning Keela and I, are a positive household. Okay? So, Pro 1, expanding the lore. We learn a lot of interesting things about the god in this. We learn that... Did we expand the lore? We expanded the magic. The second point is that we expanded the magic. Magic and the lore are kind of very connected. There are different kinds of magic now. Venus meets this guy who is a con. I put him in the cons list. She meets this guy named Pena. I don't know how you say his name. And he has like a different kind of magic than we have seen before. He's not a necromancer, which is kind of the only magic we've seen before. He works with like probabilities and happenstance, is what I would say. He's like a shitty Dirk Gently, where he's out here and he is just kind of going about life and like he can influence things, but he also sucks. So fuck him. Daniel. I love Daniel in this story. Daniel is just like a little hero boy. He is doing so good. He is doing his best. He is upset because, you know, his family, his dad died. He knows that Francis is his brother now, and they meet up, and he ends up getting pulled into the cult, which is part 3 of the things that I liked. I love cults. This was a good cult. It's run by Daniel's mom, so we get to see a lot of interesting interactions between Daniel and his mother. He tries to rescue the singer of the cult, which her job is to sing the god to sleep, to keep him contained while they work on how to work with him. There are a lot of new characters. Like I said, we get to meet Marguerite, and we get to know a little bit more about Francis. We also have some cops, which ACAB, but they're all right. They help Venus out a lot, and they're very kind to her, and I appreciate that. Alice is the singer. She's also the little sister of one of the cops. Those are all the new characters that I care about. The god's curse is interesting. So the god has left a mark on our 3 kids. And by 3 kids, I mean basically just Venus and Penny. Absolutely stunning. Venus has this like hole in her emotionally that she can just shove her feelings into. And it seemed like a very good metaphor for depression, but it is like a real thing in her soul. Like she just has like an empty space that she can put all of her thoughts and feelings into, and her concerns and shit. So that's cool. Penny is affected because she was touched by the god's blood because she stabbed it with the kitchen knife in the first book, and her hands are ice cold and they get colder every day. This leads to some very good interactions with the boys, Abraham and Daniel, because they want to kill Sherbet, who is the cat, who was skinned alive. Well, he was skinned and dead, and then Venus made him bring the skinned cat back to life. So Sherbet lives in like a stuffed animal skin. Like they gutted a stuffed animal and like put him in it. And the boys really want to kill Sherbet, which I don't condone killing of animals. But I understand why they would want to kill Sherbet, because he is kind of a little fucking cretin. But also he's like one of my favorite things about this story. I forgot to put him on the list. He's barely in it, and every time he was there I was like, fuck yeah, this little gremlin cat. But Penny's like, if Sherbet has to get killed, then I should get killed, because I've also been fucked up by the god, which like is also fair for her to feel. Both parties are reasonable in their feelings about Sherbet the cat. Let's fucking talk about some cons. Character descriptions. So, in the first story, in the first book, there is not one character description. There isn't any, which I kind of really like, even though that's not something that I tend to do in my writing. But I like the idea of characters being, like, their physical appearance being up to interpretation. This story immediately just starts describing characters, and it's fucking awful. The amount of times that I have had Penny's blue eyes described to me made me want to die. Also, it didn't help that the descriptions of the characters did not match the ones that I had in my head from the first story, so there was just like, it created like a dissonance between me and the story, how it was being told, and I did not like that. Dubeau never describes Abraham at all. He describes Venus and Penny and Daniel and Alice in like fanfiction level detail. It's like fanfiction self-insert where you're like, I wake up and I brush my long blonde hair and I blah blah. Also, I just want to say, I want to put into comparison how different my pictures of the characters were compared to how he described them. I thought that Venus was like a dark haired person because Venus says that she's named after a planet and planets are in space, and it's kind of like a hippie thing to have like long brunette hair. No, she's ginger. She's ginger with green eyes. She's Anna Green Gables. Obviously, that's Venus. And Penny, unfortunately, I think I just subconsciously filled in Penny from Stardew Valley. So ginger, you know, ginger girls are always like kind of tough, and she was really tough in the first book. Like, she's the one that like stabbed the god the first time. She's the one that like, you know, was making all these crazy choices to like save everybody. No, she's blonde with blue eyes. Not that blonde girls can't also kick ass. It's weird for him to describe in detail only the teenage girls and Daniel. Especially when there are so many characters that come back and we still technically don't know what Abraham looks like. But in my mind, he is a black man or a black boy. And if JF Dubeau suddenly came in and was like, actually, he's very white, I'd be like, okay. I'm not gonna think about him like that though. It just was too much. I got really sick of reading about the exact shade of blue that Penny's eyes are. I don't care. I do not care. There are other things that I care about, like the god, which point two, we do not fucking get enough of him. He's asleep for 80% of the book. Whenever he wakes up, a bunch of shit happens, and it's very exciting and I want to read it, but then he just goes back to sleep, and I do not care, because he is sleeping. There is so much just like human fuckery happening, like humans going around and doing shit, and I'm like, you guys do realize there's like a god of death and hatred, right? Like, he exists and he's there. But no, we don't talk about him. Never. He's just sleeping. Him, he's CB. He's CB and he EB to CB. Okay? He EB to CB. Oh, poor guy. He's so EB. It was very boring because he wasn't around to fuck shit up. First book, you're like, I don't know when he's going to get freed. I don't know when this is going to happen. Like, who's gonna fuck this up? He's like killing a bunch of random animals. People show up, he turns them into a fucking meat cape. Crazy. I forgot to add to my cons list. Okay. I'm gonna put this away because it's not on the cons list, but it pissed me off every time it happened. So, the events of the last book took place, and both of Venus's parents died, but she was only ever told that her father died. But there's a literal god of death in your backyard, and you don't think that maybe your mom was killed by it? The entire book, she fucking just goes, and my mom abandoned me in my time of need. It was so rude of my mom to abandon me. I can't believe my mom left me after my dad died. What if she died, dumbass? Think for like 2 seconds. People are missing after there was a big god rampage? A god of fucking death who was killing everything that came into your shed? And you don't think, maybe my mom's dead. But no, I hate her. She left me. Fuck off, Venus. Every time it happened, I got so pissed off. And it happens like 6 times. Including in the last 60 pages. And I'm like, Venus, think. Your mom wouldn't just fucking leave. She's dead. No one ever tells her. No one's like, hey Venus, what if your mom's fucking dead? I just don't understand. Like, that would be my first thought. If like I knew one of my parents had died and then I couldn't find the other one, I'd be like, oh, the other parent is probably also dead. But no, it's not even a thought that crosses her mind. Even for like a second. Anyway, back to this fucking list. Possible retcon for Venus's name. So, in the first book, Venus makes it very clear that her parents named her Venus, not after the god, like the Roman god Venus, but after the planet, because her destiny is in the stars. And that's beautiful. She talks about being named after God in this, and that just pissed me off. It just made me mad. I'm like, why would you even change that? It's like, well, they knew what her fucking outcome would be, like what her life would become. Okay, they knew she was gonna do great things. That doesn't mean they knew she was gonna, like, okay, I think that eventually Venus is going to become a god. PNF says a couple times, like, it takes a god to kill a god. And at some point Venus is like, I'm named after a Roman goddess. Maybe that's because I have to become a god to kill the god. And it's like, bestie, you were named after a fucking planet. Shut the fuck up. But also, I do think that Venus will become a god eventually. It was something about how at the circus in the first one, she was talking to the fortune teller, and she asked, was she talking? No, she was at the hospital, and she was talking to someone who knew about, like, the prophecies and stuff from the fortune teller, and she's like, hey, do I die fighting the god? Or she just says, like, do I die from this or something? Like, it's something, like, vague. Because he says no, and I just remember going, this bitch is never gonna fucking die. This woman's gonna be alive for the rest of time. All time, ever. Like, it's not even, like, subtle anymore, you know? My Jacobo Pina sucks. He's just, like, an asshole. He is, like, going around torturing different, like, cult members to, like, find out where they're keeping the god. And then, like, Venus goes with him. And he just is an asshole. He doesn't care about her. He doesn't care about her feelings. She's clearly going through shit and is a child. He gives her, like, next to no information, and he convinces her to stab Daniel. He convinces her to stab Daniel, and that's where I draw the line. You don't hurt Daniel. It's against the rules. So he sucks, and I thought he was going to be really cool, because they're like, we're gonna get this magic guy who's friends with Venus's grandpa, and it's gonna be so interesting, and he's, like, 7 feet tall or some shit. He's basically Az from Pokemon X and Y. That's what I pictured the whole time. But he sucked, and he didn't really bring anything cool or interesting to the table. He didn't really teach us much, except for the fact that he's gay. That's cool. He's gay, and he was in love with... Was he in love with Venus's grandpa? He was in love with someone important. I don't remember. He was in love with someone that didn't love him back, which brings us to unrequited love. And I'm not going to talk about Pena's unrequited love. I'm going to talk about the fact that throughout this entire story, we are constantly talking about Abraham's secret crush on Penny, which was not even hinted at in the first book. And I didn't think that it was important, and I still don't think it's important, but he did that. I keep saying Dubeau did that because he wanted it to mean more when he fucking killed Abraham. Abraham's dead. Spoiler, Abraham is dead. He stabbed the god through the back of the head, and the god turned around and fucking pulled his guts out with his hands. Which was sick, actually. And I thought that was really cool. I really like killing off a main character. I would have cared if he did not like Penny also, though, because we like Abraham, because we met him in the first one, and he has, like, a dying dad, and, you know, it's important, and he's an important guy, and we care about him because Venus cares about him, and I don't need to care about the fact that he is in love with Penny. And I didn't care. And every time it came up, I went, ugh. Ugh. Fucking boys. Meaningless gore. There is so much fucking gore description in this. And in the first book, there was also a lot of gore description, but it was all impactful. It was like descriptions of characters that we know, descriptions of like the god building up his power by killing a bunch of little fucking animals. It meant something. There are so many fucking cult members that just die in horribly gruesome ways that I do not care about. Just constantly. Every time the god wakes up, he kills like 10 cult members. And it's described in very interesting detail, but I don't care because I don't care about these like pretty much nameless cult people. They're just fucking jobbers, and I don't care. You can kill a jobber if you want. Why It Feels Empty. Why It Feels Empty is my last con, and we have discussed that it feels like every chapter isn't punchy enough. The last 3 chapters, like 3 to 5 chapters, are so obnoxious to read because we are rereading the exact same events from different perspectives, with like slightly extended endings to each character's perspective, and that is so uninteresting and not something that Dubeau would have done in the first book. The first book cuts out so much fluff. We will maybe get what each character was thinking of during like a major event, like with them thinking about it afterwards, like, oh, I felt sick when that happened and I can't stop thinking about it, which is fine and good. I don't want to read the exact same things happening again through the eyes of like 4 different characters. I do not care. I know what has happened, and the more that you bring it back, the less I give a shit. Fucking diminishing returns or whatever. But then the book ended, and I had this epiphany. Whoa. You're being a lot right now. Come up. Yeah. So I finished the book and I had this epiphany of why it felt the way it felt. And the best way I can do this is to describe Marvel movies. Alright, so you know how the Avengers came out and everyone was like, this is such a great movie. It's so nice and well-paced and funny and exciting. And then Age of Ultron happened and that movie sucked. And that movie sucked because it was setting up for future movies. So A God in the Shed ended in a way that felt like there was definitely more story to explore. But it was satisfying the way that it ended. So that if it didn't get picked up for a sequel, it would have been fine. This one very clearly already has a sequel in mind. And I feel like the entirety of the book was him going, we need to put out approximately the same amount of pages, but we need to build for the climactic story. Like, there's one coming after this. And I think that's not a great way to write. I think you should have, like, each book should be its own conclusive story. You can have room for sequels. Like, you don't have to wrap up every loose end. But the main ones, you should probably wrap up. Like, unless you're specifically going out of your way to write a series. Well, that's so nice. You're so pretty. You're a pretty baby. And there's this other thing where on the cover of this book, it says, the sequel to A God in the Shed, now in development for television. I think the fact that this is being turned into a television show is great. I think this is going to be a good show, and I am in full support of Canada actually making like decent watchable television shows. I feel like the fact that this is getting turned into a show is causing Dubeau to write in a way that doesn't mesh with his writing style. It's the description of the characters that I feel like he went, well, these are going to be characters that people are going to be able to see visually, so now I have to describe them. I have to tell you what they're supposed to look like before we cast it. Television shows might be paced longer, so maybe we need longer chapters to make up different episodes. People like television shows where there's like interpersonal drama, so we'll add in some unrequited love. Cops are on television. Let's make some propaganda or whatever. I feel like it went in a direction that is just so different from the first book, but also feels like a retreading of the first book in a lot of ways. We have in both books, the god is trapped in a mundane human building. In A God in the Shed, he's trapped by technology. In Song of the Sandman, he is trapped by magical singing. Crazy. In both stories, there will be like a little bit of slack and the god will hurt someone, but then he gets re-trapped. And then at the end, there's big bloodshed, a lot of fucking people die, and then someone takes the god elsewhere. Both of them end with that. God in the Shed was just so fresh, and this one just feels like you are giving me God in the Shed, but like, I've already eaten it. Like, I don't want to keep eating it. Also, this is so nitpicky. The level of quality of publishing between these two, like the physical book itself, is so noticeable. So the first one has like the pages are uneven, and I love that in a book. But we have like cover page, we have the fucking copyright, we got a little quote from H.P. Lovecraft, we have a blank page, and then we have the beginning of the prologue. Okay, and the last page in the book, the epilogue happens, and then there's a blank page with a list of patrons, and then there's like a little like preview to like another book that this publishing place is putting out, and then it ends. And it's also like they like feel different. Like this one's like almost a little sticky, and this one's like smooth. Like it's got like and there's like embossing on God in the Shed and isn't on this one, but okay, so we don't have different page lengths, which is whatever. And then we have like we straight open again to this. We have little copyright here. We go straight into the book, but the thing that gets me is this book ends. We have the last page of the story. We have a list of patrons, which is one person. Okay, this is editing Ken here. I feel like me pointing out that there was only one patron on the patron page was kind of rude. I promise that I didn't mean for it to be rude. It's just like my brain in that moment when there were a lot of patrons in the first one and there's only one in this one. And I just like wanted to say it as a difference, but I didn't point it out with the first one, so I am so sorry. I do not mean any harshness with my pointing out of the number of patrons. I think that even one person supporting your art means that you should make it, and that is all I wanted to say about that. So, please do not think that I was being a bitch. Alright, I love you. Bye. Not that that means anything. There is a little write-up about the publishing company, and then there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 blank pages. This seems like a printing error, and I don't, like, there's nothing on these. I had hoped that this book was going to have the same energy as A God in the Shed, but with just like a little bit more tidiness to it. Like I wanted to clean up some of the things that didn't make sense from the first book, maybe less like random pacing issues. Not that there were pacing issues, but like, what do I mean? What am I looking for? Continuity errors. There were continuity errors in the first one, and I just thought that maybe this would be like cleaning up but like still delivering the same level of storytelling, and it's just not. It feels like someone who is writing for a TV show in their head, And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just not what I wanted. And I loved how weird the first one was to read. I loved how it kind of like, I loved how every chapter was quick and you could sit down and you could like bang out like 5 chapters in one sitting, and it made me feel accomplished personally. And there's nothing wrong with long chapters. Like, you can have a long chapter. It's just, what's up? It's Editing Ken again. I just finally put in my brain, I put together a metaphor for how I feel about this. And so instead of making you watch me for 10 minutes go, oh man, it's just like it wasn't as good, I'm gonna say it this way. Alright? The first book was like a good kielbasa sausage, okay? Like, it maybe it's just like a little too chewy for you or something, but like it's pretty good. And then this one is boiled hot dogs. Alright, thanks. It was just disappointing. Like, there was so much style to the first book, and this one feels so basic in comparison, that I'm just disappointed. But I'm also excited that I'm done reading it, because that means I can read something else. And that's very exciting. I'm so excited to read something else. I think I said that I was going to read Monstrilio? I don't know how to say it. Monstrilio? Monstrilio? I don't know. I'm excited about that. I also got a new book, which is called What the Darkness Eats, which is written by someone who writes a lot of horror short stories. So I'm excited for that. And then my friend gave me a children's book that she says is pretty fucked up for a children's book, called The Monstrumologist. So I have like a good couple books to choose from. So hopefully you're not mad at me for my thoughts and opinions on this story. I felt so tired every time I read it, and maybe the True Song of the Sandman was the book that we read along the way, honestly. Thank you for watching. If you have thoughts, you can tell me them. I love reading comments, especially when they're not from my friends, but my friends can also leave comments, that's fine. And I hope that you'll come back for the next story, and also to see Keela, because she is so good. You are so good. And maybe I'll make some like non-book related videos in the meantime. I have some thoughts about some other things that I'd like to share. But yeah, that's all. Thanks, peace and love. Don't get into a car with a magical hobo who doesn't care that you like fucked up your ankle. You deserve better, girl. You just deserve better.